My brother stole the woman I loved. My father sided with him, and my mother pretended none of it ever happened. My name is Jimmy. I'm Canadian, and this is the story of how I was betrayed, forgotten, and then forced to choose between revenge and peace. It started on a cold December morning. Not the kind of cold that bites your skin, but the one that burrows into your chest and stays there. I was 25, working 2 jobs in Toronto, and deeply, hopelessly in love with a woman named Alina. She was everything soft and strong in this world. The kind of girl who wrote poems on napkins and saved strangers' dogs from traffic. I met her during university, and since then, my heart was no longer mine. We dated for 3 years. I was ready. I had saved for a ring. I even asked my mum if she could pass me my grandmother's diamond, just for tradition's sake. But Alina was close with my younger brother, Tyler. Now, Tyler was never a bad guy. He was charming, good-looking. Everyone said he had that movie star energy. He played guitar at church. He knew how to speak without saying much. He was always the golden boy in the family. And me? I was the quiet one, the one who tried hard. I didn't see it coming. One Sunday afternoon, I came back early from my shift. I had flowers in one hand and tickets to a weekend getaway in the other. I pushed open the door to our apartment and silence. I walked in, confused. Then I heard laughter from the bedroom. My brother, my girlfriend. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I backed out, closed the door behind me, and walked for 2 hours straight through the snow. When I confronted Alina later, she said it just happened, that she didn't mean for it to, that she didn't know how to tell me. And Tyler? He didn't even apologize. He just stood there and said, "You always knew she liked me more." My dad told me to man up. My mum just kept saying, "Families go through things." And I sat in my car in the driveway, wondering how it's possible to feel so much and nothing at the same time. They moved in together 3 weeks later. My parents even helped them move. I moved out. I found a small apartment in Scarborough. I stopped answering calls. I threw away the ring. But the worst part, it wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence that followed. No one asked how I was. No one showed up. It was like I vanished. I tried dating again. I went on weird apps. Sat through coffee dates, where I laughed at things I didn't find funny. But I was just numb. My heart felt like it belonged to someone else. Months passed. One day I got a letter in the mail. A wedding invitation. Tyler and Alina. I don't know if it was cruelty or just thoughtlessness. Maybe both. I didn't go, but I did drink. Heavily. For a month straight. Until one day, I woke up on the kitchen floor with a busted lip and a pounding headache. And I thought, what the hell am I doing? That night, I wrote a letter. Not to them. To myself. It said, "Jimmy, you're not broken. You're just waiting to become something else." And that was the start. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want pity. I wanted my name to mean something again. I wanted to live a life so full that their betrayal became a footnote, not a headline. I picked up an old notebook, started writing poetry again, just like I used to when I was 17, about pain, love, shame, the confusion of not being enough, the beauty in rebuilding. It wasn't for anyone. It was for me. And it felt good. But life wasn't done testing me yet. That summer, my dad had a heart attack. They called me. "Jimmy, he's asking for you." I didn't want to go. I really didn't. But I did. When I walked into that hospital room, he looked old, like life had worn him down. His voice was softer. He said, "I'm sorry." And for the first time, I saw him not as the man who told me to man up, but as a human who didn't know how to handle weakness. He told me he missed me, that the family felt empty without me. I didn't forgive him then. Not fully, but I nodded. Because some things don't need to be said to be understood. That night, my mum hugged me. She cried. She told me she was scared. Scared that if she picked a side, she'd lose a son. But in the process, she lost me anyway. We talked for hours. And slowly, quietly, something started to shift. Not with Tyler. I still didn't speak to him. And Alina. I hadn't seen her in over a year. But something inside me was changing. I was healing. I started publishing some of my poems online. People responded. People from Germany, Brazil, India, writing to me saying they felt the same way, that they'd been betrayed too, that my words gave them something they couldn't find anywhere else. I wasn't famous, but I mattered. And that was enough. Until one day I got a message on Instagram from Alina. She said she saw one of my poems in a bookstore, that she read it and cried, that she didn't expect to, but she did. She said she was sorry, that things with Tyler weren't like she imagined, that maybe she made a mistake. I stared at that message for a long, long time. Then I deleted it. No response. Because some stories aren't meant to be reopened, some books are better left closed. And some hearts? They're stronger when rebuilt from scratch. They say time heals everything, but honestly, time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to walk without limping. And that's exactly what I had been learning. Day by day, hour by hour, one quiet moment after another. It had been almost 2 years since the last time I saw Alina's face. Since that betrayal, since the ring I saved for was returned to the bottom of a drawer where it still sat, untouched. It had been over a year since that night in the hospital, when my father apologized with tears in his eyes. And now, here I was standing on a stage in a small community arts center in downtown Toronto, reading my words out loud to strangers who clapped like they meant it. I was finally living again. My name is still Jimmy, still Canadian, still quiet, but different now. I run poetry workshops on weekends. I teach kids how to find their voice, using nothing but a pen and pain. I don't do it for money. I do it because I remember what it felt like to be invisible. And I promised myself, if I ever found a way out, I'd help someone else find it too. One Saturday, a little girl named Hannah raised her hand in class and asked, "Mr. Jimmy, why do grown-ups cry when they read sad poems?" I paused, I smiled, and I said, "Because grown-ups forget how to feel until the words remind them." That evening, I walked out of class to find my mum waiting outside in the cold. She had that look on her face, the one that meant something heavy was coming. "Can we talk?" she asked. We walked to a coffee shop nearby. She told me my brother had been struggling, badly. Alina had left. He had lost his job, was drinking, staying out all night, and now he was living with my parents again. I didn't say anything for a while. I stared at the foam in my coffee, the way it moved like clouds when you stirred it just right. Then I said, "I don't know what you want me to do." She didn't cry, but her voice cracked. "I don't want you to fix him. I just want you to remember you're still his brother." She left me with that, and I sat there for a long time. The next day, I walked to my parents' house. It was a weird feeling being back. Same couch, same smell, same family photos on the wall, and there he was, Tyler, sitting on the steps, hoodie pulled over his head, dark circles under his eyes. He looked up, and when he saw me, he didn't say a word, just looked away. I sat next to him, still silence. Then he said, "She said she loved me, man. She lied." I didn't know if he meant Alina or someone else, maybe even both, but I nodded, not because I forgave him, but because I understood. We sat there for 2 hours. No yelling, no blaming, just silence that felt like peace instead of punishment. I left that day feeling lighter, not because everything was okay, but because I realized something. Letting go isn't the same as giving in. 3 months later, I got an email from a local publisher. They wanted to publish my first collection, 88 poems, all handwritten, all real, all mine. When the book came out, I didn't expect much, but it sold, slowly, then quickly, then internationally. I started getting invited to talk at schools, universities, even TEDx, and I always started every talk the same way. "My name is Jimmy. I was betrayed by the people I loved the most, but I lived, and I wrote, and I healed." One day, after a talk in Montreal, a woman walked up to me in tears. She said her husband had left her for her sister, that she hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks, that she wanted to die, but my words made her want to try again. And just like that, I realized, maybe all this pain wasn't wasted. I started something called the Ink Project, a free support group for people healing through writing. We meet twice a month, and every time, someone new walks in with shaking hands, and walks out a little straighter. Sometimes I still think about what happened. Sometimes I still feel that sting in my chest, but it doesn't control me anymore. I've learned that family isn't always about blood. It's about presence, about truth, about showing up. And sometimes, the most beautiful part of your story is the part where you thought it was over, but it wasn't. Because it's never over. Not until you stop turning pages. And I've got chapters left. So I'll keep writing. Some nights I stay up till 3 a.m., with a dim light beside my desk and a half-empty cup of cold coffee, hammering my soul into sentences. I write not just for the world, but for myself, for the younger Jimmy who had no voice, for the broken Jimmy who cried into a motel pillow, for the brave Jimmy who dared to start over. It had become my ritual now. Every morning, I walked to the same little park near my apartment, sat on the same bench, and watched the sun claw its way over the skyline. Then I'd come home, shower, eat some cheap cereal, and write for hours. I wasn't doing it for money anymore. I was doing it because stories had saved me, and maybe one of mine could save someone else too. People started to notice. A few emails came in from readers who said my words stopped them from doing something tragic. A young boy told me he read my work aloud to his mum every night, just to see her smile again. A woman who lost her husband said my story reminded her how to hope. That's when I realized this wasn't just writing. It was healing. And I was healing too. Then something unexpected happened. An old high school friend named Marcus reached out to me. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. He said he'd stumbled upon my latest book, and it had moved him so much he decided to fly across the country to visit me. We met at the same park bench. He walked up slowly, taller and bulkier than I remembered, but the same warmth in his eyes. We hugged like brothers who had survived separate storms. "Jimmy," he said, "your words pulled me out of a dark place." I couldn't respond. I just nodded. He told me he was now running a non-profit that helped ex-convicts get back on their feet. He asked me to speak at one of their events. I was terrified. I had never spoken publicly, but something told me I had to say yes. The night of the event, I stood in a room of 50 hardened men, each with a past more brutal than mine. My hands trembled, voice cracked, but as I spoke, I saw tears. I saw nods. I saw change. That night, something inside me shifted. I realized my life was no longer just mine. It belonged to everyone who needed to hear, "You're not done yet." So I began doing more talks. Small bookstores, rehab centers, shelters. I shared pieces of myself each time. The pain, the mistakes, the nights I almost gave up. And slowly, the crowd grew. Eventually, a TEDx organizer reached out. They'd seen one of my smaller talks online and asked if I'd be willing to speak at their event. I froze. This was a big stage. Cameras, lights, the whole deal. I said yes. I prepared for weeks. Practiced in front of mirrors, trees, even my reflection in the microwave. When the day came, I wore the same shirt I wore on my lowest day, the day I lost everything, just to remind myself how far I'd come. I stood on that red dot, heartbeat in my throat, and I told the world my story, raw, unfiltered, honest. The video went viral. Millions watched, millions shared. My inbox flooded. Publishers, producers, strangers. That's when Netflix called. Yes, Netflix. They wanted to adapt my story into a limited series. I nearly dropped the phone. We had meetings. They sent over contracts, big ones, with big numbers. But I wasn't chasing money anymore. I asked for creative control. I wanted it real, gritty, not some polished lie. To my surprise, they agreed. Filming began 6 months later. I was on set nearly every day. They even let me play a small role, a counselor who helps the fictional version of me. It was surreal. I watched actors say my words, live my heartbreak, and rise from my ashes. I cried behind the scenes more times than I can count. When the show finally aired, it was an instant hit. Critics praised it for its raw honesty. People from every walk of life messaged me, telling me they saw themselves in my pain. And that's when the speaking offers came flooding in. Universities, corporate events, international conferences. I traveled the world, London, Tokyo, Cape Town. I met people who spoke different languages, but their stories were the same: loss, hope, redemption. And every time I stood on a new stage, I reminded myself, I was just Jimmy, a broken kid who decided to keep going. I still lived in a modest home. I didn't buy the big mansion. I drove a second-hand car. Fame didn't matter to me. Truth did. But then came an email that changed everything. It was from a woman named Anika. She said she was a social worker in Toronto and had been following my journey for years. She invited me to visit her youth center, said there were kids who needed to hear from someone like me. I said yes. When I arrived, I saw it a worn-down building with flickering lights but filled with energy. The kids were loud, chaotic, alive. I sat down with them, told them stories, listened to theirs. That's when I met Elijah. He was 14, quiet, angry, reminded me of myself, refused to speak at first. But over time, he started opening up. He told me his dad was in prison. His mum was addicted. He lived with his aunt who barely noticed him. We started writing together. Little poems, short stories. His words were raw, powerful. I visited weekly, bought new notebooks, taught workshops. That place became my new home. Anika and I grew close. She had this calm wisdom about her, like she'd seen the world break and still chose kindness. We had long conversations about change, about healing, about what it means to show up. One night, while locking up the center, she turned to me and said, "Jimmy, I think you were meant to find us." I smiled. I think I was too. Soon after, I helped raise funds to rebuild the center. We brought in therapists, writers, musicians. It became a sanctuary. Elijah published his first collection at 16. The dedication said, "For Jimmy, who saw me." That broke me, in the best way. I realized that while my words had reached millions, it was these moments, small, real, human, that mattered most. So I kept going, kept showing up. Not as a celebrity, as Jimmy, a man who learned the hard way that you don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to be real. And so I still keep writing. The house that I once saw as a distant dream was now a reality. The mansion stood tall in front of me, my testament to the resilience I'd fought to hold on to. The bricks, the mortar, the marble floors, all symbols of my struggle, my persistence, my triumph over every hardship. It was more than just a house. It was my world rebuilt, a symbol of my journey, not just the physical one, but the one within. As I stood at the front gate, looking at the towering structure, I realized that this was more than just wealth. It was freedom. It was peace. A place where I could breathe deeply, where the echo of my past no longer haunted me, the place that gave me the solitude I'd longed for, the privacy I never had, and the satisfaction of knowing I had built it all from the ground up. But of course it wasn't just mine. It was for my brother too. That thought, though, carried a weight with it. I'd made sure to leave a space in the house for him, because family was family. No matter how far apart life had pushed us. We'd had our differences, yes. But despite everything, the bond was undeniable. I called him over that day, joking around like we used to, making fun of each other, just like the old times. But behind my jokes, there was something heavier I was trying to shake off, a question I'd never fully addressed. One I wasn't sure if I could. "Man, can you believe this place?" I laughed, trying to keep the mood light as I walked him through the grand hall. "I could fit your whole apartment in here, with space for your lazy boy chair." I teased him, nudging his shoulder playfully. He chuckled back, but his eyes held a depth to them, one that I hadn't seen before. "Yeah, it's insane, bro. You really did it." We both stopped in the middle of the living room, taking in the view from the large windows. The golden light of the afternoon sun illuminated the space, filling it with warmth. But there was something about that moment that felt like a pause, like the calm before the storm. I looked at him and said, "I've been thinking, this place, it's not just for me, Jimmy. It's for us. I never really had anyone to share it with, And you've been there through it all more than anyone. I'm not just building this for me. It's for you too. You were always there." He looked at me, his expression softening. "I don't know, man. Sometimes I feel like I missed my chance to be part of this. Part of your life. I see you've moved on from everything, built yourself up. And me? I'm still, stuck." I felt the truth of his words hit me. And for the first time, I realized something that had always been lurking just beneath the surface. The years we had spent apart, the silence, the unspoken truths, they had built walls between us. My success, the mansion, the life I'd worked so hard for, had become a barrier rather than a bridge. I hadn't realized how much I'd isolated myself, how much I'd pulled away, even from him. "I'm sorry, man," I said, my voice a little rough. "I didn't mean for you to feel that way. I should have been there more. I should have reached out. I've been so caught up in my own stuff that I didn't see it. But you've always been my brother, no matter what. And this house, this life, it's yours too." He nodded, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to decide whether or not he believed me. After a long silence, he smiled faintly. I guess we both still have a lot to work through, huh?" I laughed, a small chuckle of relief. "Yeah, but we'll get there, I promise." We spent the rest of the evening talking, not just about the house, but about everything we'd missed, all the little things, the moments we'd forgotten to share. It felt like we were building something, not just the house, but our relationship too, one brick at a time. As the night went on, I realized that the mansion wasn't just a place to live. It wasn't about the wealth, the space, the luxury. It was about giving myself and my family the chance to heal, to come back together. That's what mattered now. My parents, they were alive, yes, but not in the way I'd once hoped. My father had never been the kind of man to show affection or even reach out. He was distant, his love, his approval, something that was always just out of reach. And my mother, well, I didn't know how to feel about her. She had her own life, her own struggles. She was there, but in her own way, never quite as present as I had needed her to be. But now, I wasn't sure how to even reach out to them, how to call them, and tell them that I was happy, that I had a life, that I was okay. I hadn't married anyone. There had been opportunities, yes. There were women who had come into my life, who had shown interest, who had wanted to share this success with me, but something in me resisted. The same resistance I had felt in my past toward everything that felt like it could trap me. Marriage, family, all of that. I had been burned once, twice, even. It felt like a risk I wasn't ready to take. So I stayed single, just focusing on my work, my writing, my life. My brother too hadn't married. He was still alone, his heart guarded, just like mine. The difference was that he hadn't built a mansion. He hadn't made it out the way I had. And maybe that's why he couldn't see the beauty in the life I'd built. But that wasn't his fault. I had to let him find his own way, just like I had. There was a quiet understanding between us, one that only brothers could share. We both knew we'd had our struggles, our failures, and yet we still had each other. That was enough for me, enough for both of us. But as I sat there, in the stillness of the mansion, I knew that I had more to give. I knew that I could rebuild, not just a house, but a life one filled with love, respect, and yes, maybe even the possibility of finding someone to share it all with. But for now, I was content. I had found peace in the chaos. I had found a new strength in my solitude, in my ability to stand alone. And as I looked out the window, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the sky, I realized that I was no longer the man who had been abandoned, the man who had been hurt. I was Jimmy, the man who had rebuilt himself from nothing, a man who could now stand tall, proud of what he had accomplished, and ready for whatever the future might hold. So yeah, maybe there would be love in the future. Maybe there wouldn't be. But whatever it was, I had learned that the most important thing wasn't the mansion, the money, or even the people in my life. It was the person I had become. And that, to me, was more than enough.